Welcome, everybody. We are extremely glad that you joined us today. We have a very special guest speaker, but before I introduce him, I wanted to just introduce our staff. They'll just wave. So if you have the gallery view on, you'll be able to see them. First up, we have Brooke, who some of you are under her advisement in the AP program, and she is in Delaware, not Maine, but Delaware. We have BJ, who is in Texas. We have Mike McCabe, who doesn't have his video on, but that's all right. I think he's having some internet connectivity issues, and he's in Colorado. I'm in Colorado. And then we have our director for the first time on the Zoom calls. We have Mr. John on the call, and he is in Texas. So we are excited to learn today. This is going to be a great call as a follow-up to what we discussed last week, and many of you are in the government contracts world or in pursuit of it. So this is going to be a great follow-up, as you saw on the read ahead. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker. His name is Ben Saylor. He has been connected to the Semper Fi Fund for its entirety. He has, I'm not going to go too much into his background, but he spent 16 years in the private sector after retiring at the colonel level of the Marine Corps. He has graciously offered up his services. And this guy, I'm going to brag on him for a sec. He has got the ability to teach you something in an education that you could pay $100,000 for and probably still not be at the level that he would give you. And this is just going to be maybe an hour. So absorb what you've got. If you've got questions, don't be afraid to ask them. This is a unique opportunity for all of us to learn and grow. And some of my guys are on this call. Man, what a great opportunity. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to Mr. Ben Saylor.
Casey, well, thank you so much. And I can tell you, everybody, it's a great pleasure to be here this morning. And I'm talking to a multitude of people from various backgrounds and various services. I'm not a parochial guy, but some of my comments will be from a Marine perspective. So I hope you'll forgive me for that. But what we're really going to be talking about today is building on what Max did in his session last week. Max really focused on some of the mechanics and the key steps of establishing your small business as a entity that can do business with the U.S. federal government. Well, I'm going to take that a step further and talk about business development philosophy. And these are lessons learned that I have compiled over the past 16 years in the private sector, working exclusively in the federal government domain. Just to give you a little bit of insight on my background so you know where I'm coming from. When I retired in 2004, I got out and I did what a lot of former military people do. I worked in the combat developments world as a subcontractor and consultant to Boeing. So I was in the combat development field for a number of years, about 6. And then I wanted to do something entirely different. So I took a path of small business ownership and entrepreneurship. I really wanted to do something different. And I wanted to get into the manufacturing sector, which I'd never experienced prior in my adult life. And I wanted to get into manufacturing, and I wanted to get into a hardcore sales climate because I'd never experienced that before. So through my company, and my company's name is Fidelity Contract Flooring, doing business as Destiny Alliance Consultant, because I do flooring business, but I also do consulting in government sales and government sales development, which is what we're talking about this morning. And so today, my company, really, I work in the federal government domain. As Max indicated last week, he talked about socioeconomic statuses. I am a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. I have been that since 2007. I'm credentialed, just like Max articulated to you, through the Center of Veterans Enterprise and Examination. And I'm also a GSA contract holder, General Service Administration contract holder, and I served on the board of GSA for 5 years representing the flooring industry. So I've got good experience with federal supply schedules as well. And with that as a backdrop, I really want to start introducing the topic of how to be successful philosophically from a business development standpoint in the federal government domain. And I want to talk as a precursor to that, really about what differentiates us as prior military, irrespective of your service, and what credentials and capabilities you bring to the table that are, preeminently relevant to a federal government customer. And it might be a little counterintuitive to you, but I'm going to get a little Marine parochial here for a second. Please forgive me. But in the Marine Corps, we talk about fidelity, semper fidelis, always faithful. And I've entitled this presentation, Fidelity-Based Business. You know, what made the Marine Corps the force and readiness for our nation, our 9/11 force, is the fact that we are always faithful to achieve mission success, and always faithful to each other in anything that we do. So, and that's really best articulated in our enlisted promotion warrant. It goes like this: to all who shall see these presents, greetings. Know ye that reposing special trust and confidence in the fidelity and ability of I am Marine, I do appoint him a Lance Corporal of the United States Marine Corps to rank as such, et cetera, et cetera. But in that masterfully written document, fidelity is always valued first above ability. And the reason I say that is this: you know, you can be the most well-trained, equipped force in the battle space and still, pardon me, get your ass kicked in a fight. It's fidelity that sets us apart. It's our fidelity to mission success and to each other that sets us apart and makes us that junkyard dog in the battle space. And that is, I can tell you folks, based on my experience, that is the most important differentiator we bring into the private sector, is our fidelity. Irrespective of all the credentials you can have on your resume or on your business capability statement, it's the fidelity that we bring to the private sector that will differentiate you. Your ability to take on and embrace your customer's ideal state, not their current state, their ideal state, and make it your own. And then your fidelity to achieve in collaboration with your customers that ideal state. That's going to set you apart. Now, there's a couple of concepts I'd like to introduce to you before we get into the heart of the discussion. First of all is the concept of annuity business. Okay, there's, you know, if you think about the customer relationship, the business relationship spectrum, from no history with a customer to the point that you're a strong incumbent, that you own the business, you have fully penetrated that customer, and you're their go-to supplier for your respective service or material solution. So on the high end of that spectrum, where you're that strong incumbent, that is annuity business, okay? Now, both transactional business, where you're actually looking at new opportunities in the marketplace, bidding on those opportunities, and trying to get an entree into earning a government customer's business, that's transactional. There's always a place for that. You know, you always want to have your fingers on the pulse of what's going on in the marketplace. And you have to do that through transactional business. But what you ultimately want to do is take that initial contract with that customer and develop it into an annuity relationship. You know, Zig Ziglar, a pretty prominent motivational speaker from years ago, used to say this. He would say, hey, if a customer likes you, they'll talk to you. But if they trust you, they'll do business with you. Okay? That goes back to the point about fidelity. That goes back to the point about building that customer relationship. Relationships are everything. And we understand that kind of collaboration from our prior military service, and it's preeminently relevant and applicable in the federal government domain. Okay, let me give you another thought on transactional versus annuity business. Again, both of them are very, very important, but a business like yourself, if you're a small business owner, which I suspect many of you are, if you're that entrepreneur and you've got that entrepreneurial spirit, you know, your book of business will probably be somewhere around 60 to 70% annuity, 30 to 40% transactional. That's the balance I try to achieve, because when you're that annuity business holder, you've got business you can count on, and you've always got sales upcoming, and you're not out there in necessarily doing bids and proposing because you're already established under some kind of agreement, either an IDIQ contract, indefinite delivery, indefinite contract, or some kind of buying purchasing agreement, or et cetera. So that's another point about annuity versus transactional business. And the other thing, the last point I'll make before I jump into philosophy, is this presentation is really about customer relationships. There's other relationships out there that are equally important and can be equally as complex. Like for instance, if you're a small business owner and you're representing a product offering to the US federal government, I suspect most of you are not manufacturers, right? You don't manufacture that material, solution, or product. So you have to get it from a supplier, right? So supplier relationships can be equally complex and important as your customer relationship, because you have to develop the same level of annuity trust with your suppliers in order to represent their products and material solutions to your customer base as a small business professional. At this point, again, I don't want to turn this into a monologue, but that's really the backdrop of what I want to state before we get into some of the philosophy aspects of this. Casey, are we okay?
Yeah, I think we're great. I think this is a great topic to start off with. A lot of our challenges come around maintaining relationships, especially in a world right now where even if you're not in federal contracts, where there is money to be spent, how do I maintain a relationship with a customer who is now going to go based on price, maybe not that relationship? So just, I love the concept. I'm really excited about some of the things that you're going to talk about with customer service and business development.
Tally ho. Thanks, Casey. Well, now let's just talk about, and I hope some of you may have the read ahead that I put out in front of you, because I want to, hit the wave tops on some of these concepts. But look at that first one. What government sales winners do differently. Now you can Google that and you can find, 1,000 different studies on what makes, businesses successful. These are the ones that I have encountered in the last 16 years that have directly contributed to the annuity business that I have developed. And the first one is always listen. It's always listen. And I'm going to give you a vignette, and it says there, comprehend and envision your customer's ideal state. And I'm going to give you I don't think I'll use that. I won't use that military analogy, but what I'll tell you, I want to give you a kind of a war story from the private sector. I was down in John Mayer's neck of the woods. I was down in San Antonio a number of years ago, and I called on a customer. And it was interesting because, when you do business development, and I don't know how much of experience you have with sales calls and that kind of thing, but it's something that's integral to what we do. And that's what this is really about. These differentiators we're going to be talking about is how you develop that through sales calls and relationship building. But I was with this particular customer in San Antonio, and he was one of the prominent floor covering installers in the state of Texas. He did a lot of education business, did a lot of government business. And so I sat down, and he had been in business for 50 years. He was a seasoned, business owner, and he had his two sons there. It was a family business. So just a classic small family-owned small business entrepreneurs. But anyway, so I sat down, and I made a mistake I'm going to share with you. A lot of times when you go into a sales call, you show up and you throw up. You start talking about yourself, and that's exactly what you don't want to do. So I got there, and I came in, and I started the conversation off, and I thought I was killing it. I thought I was nailing down all the stuff that I could do for this particular company. And I remember the gentleman held his hand up, and he goes, "Stop." He goes, "You know why I like doing business with you?" And I said, "What's that?" He says, "You pay me on time, and you make joint sales call with my sales force." So, in two quick bullets, he took me from this infinite domain of all the capabilities that we could try to connect the dots on. And he said, "My ideal state is this. You pay me on time and you'll make joint sales calls." So what I'm talking about is when you make that initial sales call, and when you talk about listening, go in and sit down. And just after you slide your business card and capability statement across the table, just look at the gentleman or look at your customer and say, "Hey, tell me about your business." And these people are proud of who they are. They're proud of what they do. They're proud of the company that they've built. And they will talk to you, and they will tell you, just about everything you need to know to get at that ideal state and what you need to shoot on. We're all prior military. We're all marksmanship trained. You want to be shooting in the V ring on that target, right? So you're not going to shoot at that customer's current state. what you want to do is you want to take that customer to the ideal state as they articulate it to you. And you say, oh, hey, after they explain their business to you, and again, you're in the listening mode, you're trying to connect, you're trying to understand, you're trying to do all the things that differentiate us on the read ahead. Say something like this. Well, you know, what kind of issues do you face, or what's your pain points? You know, what can I do that's different that will earn your business? Tell me about that. And then they'll give you their pain points and their, you know, their issues. And then you can start connecting how your capability set will connect with theirs, and you can earn their business. But you see, listen, connect, understand. You got to embrace that ideal state after you've had it articulated to you. You know, in many cases, federal government customers, particularly like in my domain, the flooring domain, these people don't really understand flooring and all the facets of flooring. So I can explain and educate. I can also persuade. We go in and we persuade on what is, you know, currently happening in your sector of business, whatever it may be. You need to be a preeminent expert on the trends and thought leadership in your respective domain, and you need to share that readily and openly with your customers. That will again build trust. You want to assist with pain points and pitfalls. You want to collaborate at the speed of relevance, what I call the speed of relevance, and that's again aligned with your customer's ideal state as they evolve in their business development and customer requirements. You need to evolve very, very closely and perfectly aligned with that. And then another thing that's important, when you're doing business with the U.S. federal government, your government customer, particularly the procurement officer or contracting officers, will want the path of least resistance in terms of procurement. You know, so you need to understand the purchasing process, and you need to be able to navigate that purchasing process with great speed and agility. Okay, like for instance, I do a lot of business with the department, and my floor covering business focuses in the realm of the Department of Veterans Affairs. I do a lot of business with the Department of Veterans Affairs. So a procurement official called me the other day from the VA in Memphis, VA Medical Center in Memphis, and said, hey, do you have this? I said, yes, I'll have a quote to you in 30 minutes. And then I sent the quote. He sent me a purchase order 30 minutes later. And then I ordered it from my supplier, which in this case was Mannington. And I delivered 110 cartons of luxury vinyl tile to the hospital within 10 days. I called him yesterday. He gave me his credit card information, and it was done. You know, actually, that's what I'm talking about, annuity business. You know, 3 phone calls, a couple of emails, and you're done. And you know why that works? Because it just makes that procurement process for that contracting official as painless and as efficient as it possibly can be. So you need to understand the purchasing path that your customer works with, and you need to be able to navigate that with agility and speed. And then finally, deliver. You know, so much of what we do in the federal government domain, you know, and you'll notice that everything I've got written here is differentiators, and what we do differently has nothing to do with a material solution or a product. You know, a product, you know, actually in reality is just a widget. You could apply this to any product you have. You know, whatever material solution you're representing, this will work equally well for that particular material solution. What this is really about is service solutions. How do you achieve 100% customer satisfaction? And it's always in the service domain. You know, the fact that you answer your phone, the fact that you understand the ideal state, the fact that you can do a quote in 30 minutes, the fact that you understand the procurement process, and the fact that you can do credit card purchasing, you know, with absolutely no pain. You know, so it's those types of things that you have to get dialed in to be able to achieve customer satisfaction and always shoot at the next contract. Again, you don't want to stay in the transactional mode. You want to develop into the annuity mode where you have an established customer. Okay, and I've got a note out there to the side. Together, these attributes create value for your customers and differentiate you from the competition. So what we're really talking about with all these intangible attributes of business development goes back to the point of fidelity. Your commitment to that customer, your ability to embrace their ideal state, first of all, understand it, make it your own, and then deliver it. That's where you win. That's how you get in the end zone in the federal government domain. Are we good?
Yeah, Ben, I actually got a question. This is fantastic. I think the the key part that you keep saying the word fidelity and just hammering it away. It's beautiful. And staying focused on mission. How can I serve this customer? Now, there will come times, obviously, in any transaction or relationship where there'll be kind of contention. And I actually got a question that says, how does your business address points of contention with incumbent contractors? And it's something that you'll always have to deal with in business, but nice to have those tools. So if you could talk a little bit to that.
Yeah, absolutely, Casey. Great question. Okay, so we're actually going to get, that's a good segue into the next segment because, you know, if you're on the outside looking in and you're looking at an incumbent, you know, a strong incumbent, you know, you need to study that incumbent, know what their capabilities are, see where the capability gaps are. When you talk to that customer and you say, how can I earn your business? And they throw out some pain points. You know, what they're saying is essentially, hey, this is where my incumbent is falling short. Okay, so that's where you really need to focus. It may be something minute to you, but it's not minute to your customer. But it's a capability gap that you can fill to earn and unseat that incumbent. And that goes back to another point about annuity business. Once, congratulations, you're now the go-to supplier for that particular federal government's customer. But you got to be as focused and fidelity based once you're the incumbent as you are when you're on the outside looking in and trying to develop that relationship. And to your point directly, Casey, if you look on the diagram that I've got on that page there about how do I apply these winning attributes to my business, everything revolves around the voice of the customer. You know, build the customer relationship, qualify, pursue, propose. That's a continuum that will develop annuity business for you. But at the hub of that continuum is the voice of the customer. The tighter you got your business wrapped around the voice of the customer, the more you pulse your customer on what his ideal state is, knowing that it's going to evolve continuously and you need to evolve. As entrepreneurs, guys, we have to evolve continuously. As an entrepreneur, the day you stop evolving is the day you become irrelevant in business, particularly with the federal government. So you need to revolve around the voice of the customer to stay that incumbent. Does that make sense, Casey? Now
Yes, sir.
let me give you another point on that, because part of business is, even when you're an incumbent, part of the normal life of an entrepreneur is on some contracts, for whatever reason, you're going to get sideways with your customer. It could be a material solution flaw. It could be a customer service flaw. It could be, hey, I'm shipping product X from point A to point B, and my shipping company is now a week late because of COVID, difficulties, that kind of thing. How do you impart that to your customer? Well, again, as long as you keep that customer informed, as long as you're bringing solutions to the table, as long as you're making this as painless as possible for your customer, that's how you mitigate those types of issues. And so, earning business, annuity business in particular, is as much about how you handle claims as you do on the front end. And if you're not good at handling claims on the back end, guess what? There will never be another front end. Okay, it just goes, and they'll go to the next potential supplier. Make sense? So it's all part of the solution. And so while we're on this, if you look at that annuity business development model that I put down there, again, the voice of the customer is that critical hub. You've got to get tight around that voice of the customer. Okay, and you build customer relationships. But before I get into this, and I want to tell you, entrepreneurs and in just your general life, ask yourself this: what is my winning philosophy in life? What is my winning philosophy in life? And I can tell you, mine is, I've developed it over time, but I call it the quality of firsts. See first, understand first, act first, finish decisively. Okay, and that that aligns perfectly with the annuity business development model that I'm talking about here. If you look at that circle around the voice of the customer, the first point is qualify. And it says, in the handout, make informed decisions about an opportunity. But when you're qualifying that opportunity, what you're really doing is answering a couple of questions. Is there an opportunity? Is it worth winning? And I can tell you, folks, this is important. Not all opportunities are worth pursuing. You got to make informed judgment about opportunities and make sure, and as entrepreneurs, we always want to find a way to say yes, right? I mean, that's a big part of it. We got to find a way to say yes, but in some cases, saying no and making no as a pursuit decision is a good business decision because of financial ramifications. It may be a black hole that's just going to suck too much time out of your day, et cetera. It could be a multitude of realities like that. And then the third question when you qualify is, can we win? Can we legitimately win this? And so when you qualify an opportunity, understand what it is, make sure that there's enough return on investment, and make sure you can win it. And then you make that go, no go decision. Okay. So qualify. Then you go in, once you make that pursuit decision, you need to develop what I call a notional business development profile. And I apologize, I found a misspelling in my handout. I think I said notational. My ability to type and see is diminishing over time. But anyway, notional business development profile. And I'm gonna walk you through that. But again, that notional business development profile, which is outlined on the next page, is really, again, revolves around the voice of the customer, a competitive summary, just what you were talking about earlier, Casey. And I can tell you this, I want to tell you this straight up. In my 16 years of experience in the private sector companies don't do a good job of assessing the competition. It's inexplicable to me. In the military service, we never went into a battle space that we didn't have great intel on, right? We're very adept and very aligned with intelligence thinking. And Sun Tzu said, hey, know your enemy and win 1,000 battles, et cetera. We know about that. That's innate to us. That's intuitive to us. But take that into your business development philosophy, because I tell you, you can prove me wrong at a later date, but I think you'll find that, most companies are out there just pushing their capabilities and not understanding what the competition can and can't do to give yourself a competitive edge. So that competitive summary is always important. And then based on that, you develop an engagement strategy. So that's the pursuit phase. And then you get into the propose phase, and that's where you put that actual proposal together. That proposal can be developed on an actual solicitation that you get through betasam.gov or wherever your opportunity source of intelligence is in the government domain, and there are many. But betasam.gov, as Max talked about last week, is one of the preeminent ones to see solicitation. So whether you're responding to a solicitation through that medium, or you've made a customer call and you're going to make an unsolicited proposal, make sure that your proposal is complete and it does everything that it says right there. It's strategically sound, fiscally responsible, fully responsive to the customer's ideal state. You got to shoot at that ideal state. You've got to differentiate yourself from the incumbent, and by identifying the capability gaps and filling those gaps and taking away the pain points and issues that incumbent has with that customer. And they're always there, folks. They're always there. There's always something that you can do that does it better. Okay. And then once you have gotten a contract award, take the time to analyze what you did right, what you did wrong. Sit down with that customer and say, will you debrief me on the proposal that I put in? And, where did you see the weak points? Focus on that. And again, beef up and make more robust the capabilities you have to meet that capability, that customer's ideal state. And you'll baseline a customer service approach that will win for you and make you that strong incumbent. Make sense?
Yes, sir. You just talked about kind of a three-stage process, and engagement in there was one that I think most people get, whether they're afraid of it or stuck on. I actually have a couple of questions that came up. Now, one of them is very specific, and I'm going to save that for the end because I think there's a time to get detailed about a specific case. But here's the question: if a point of contact is listed in an RFQ or RFP, do you begin your process by reaching out to the contracting officer responsible for that solicitation? And do you feel this will strengthen your proposal or hurt it?
Absolutely.
And then I have a follow-up to that as well.
Yeah, and let me give you the classic model, and you'll see this if you're on betasam.gov and you're seeing under, and I'll get into this a little bit later, and Max mentioned it last week. You know, you talk about building a small business profile in the system for award management. You have to have a profile that outlines your basic capabilities, and it will delineate your capabilities in terms of NAICS codes, the North American Industrial Classification System code. So, for instance, in floor covering, I have 2 NAICS codes, and then for consulting, I have another one. 314110 is soft surface flooring, and 321918 is resilient flooring. So that encapsulates most of the flooring material solutions. And so when I'm on betasam.gov, I do searches against those NAICS codes by agency. And I can go in and look at the Department of Veterans Affairs solicitations, or I can look at DOD solicitations. You name the federal agency, all 105 plus of them. $1.5 trillion in contracts last fiscal year, FY19. But let me direct it. I had to say that, Casey, to get to your point. Now, put yourself in the position of your contracting officer. Okay, a contracting officer is putting out. He has a requirement. Let's just start at the very beginning. He has a requirement in whatever area. Okay, and so there's a life cycle to the solicitation and contract award process. What will normally happen is that contracting officer will get the requirement from internal to his agency. Like if it's a VA, the VA hospital in Memphis has a requirement for flooring, right? So that procurement decision maker will pass that off to contracting and say, okay, we need to do this, and we need to do this in quarter umpty frats. Okay, so that contracting officer is going to go out and do what's known as market research. He'll put out a sources sought. You'll hear the term sources sought, or even pre-solicitation. And what that is that's that contracting officer laying out a bare bones construct for that solicitation, that statement of work, and testing the water. Okay, how many small businesses do I have out there? Or how many business do I have out there? And then based on the response he gets, he'll actually make it a set aside. For instance, if he gets 2 or more service disabled veteran-owned small businesses that respond favorably and are vetted and can meet the capability, he may make that solicitation ultimately, when it's published, a SDVOSB set aside, or a women-owned small business set aside, or 8A set aside, whatever the socioeconomic class he's looking for. But so to answer your question, Casey, you go from the market research phase into the pre-solicitation phase, where he puts out a statement of work and he wants industry feedback on the statement of work to see if there's any issues. Then he'll put out the actual solicitation. And in every phase, the contracting officer will note what the next step is. And then he'll put out the actual solicitation, and he'll get responses from industry. And then the contract award is ultimately made based on whatever contract award criteria are out there. Many times it will be Max talked about LPTA, low price technically acceptable. That's not the domain we want to live in. We want to bring value to our customers. And so you want to propose customer service solutions that will bring value and be in. So depending on so anyway, what I'm saying is I'm trying to explain what you'll see in a life cycle of a transaction, a government transaction. And what I would advocate to you and what I recommend to you is that participate in every step of the way. Be out there on betasam.gov, not looking for solicitation, looking for sources sought. As soon as that sources sought comes out, I will have my capability statement to that contracting officer in 45 minutes. You know, what's that do? It tells that contracting officer, hey, somebody's listening. Number one, I've got a proactive company here that's aggressive. You know, that's a differentiator. And then you just try to influence that. And the other thing, I want to make in turn everything I possibly can to an SDVOSB set aside. So without a sufficient number of responses, that contracting officer can't do that. And what that does is when I influence the action on that with that contracting officer, I'm culling the herd from 1,000 small businesses to maybe 3% SDVOSBs that can play in that against that requirement. So a long answer to a specific question, but I hope it made sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think there was a follow up, but you kind of touched on it. Kind of tricks or techniques for an unsolicited proposal to get that engagement. If you have any of those.
Now let me talk about unsolicited. Now that's what I just described was solicited proposals, right? Unsolicited proposals is really where the art of entrepreneurship comes in. And that's I love to cold call. I'll pick a customer out and I'll go make a cold call on that customer. And let me give you a couple of tricks of the trade that I've learned over time. I'll pick out 3 or 4 prospective customers and I'll go down to Starbucks, and I always have a stack of $5 Starbucks gift certificates in my pocket, and because, when I show up at that customer's office, what I'll do is I'll talk to the receptionist and I'll say, hey, and I'll already know, you got to know when you make customer calls, particularly cold calls, you've already done all the due diligence. You know exactly who you need to talk to. You know exactly what you need to say to that individual, and you're going to make that unsolicited proposal, but you've got to get in the door, right? So you walk up to the receptionist and say, hey, if you can get me 5 minutes with, so-and-so, so I can just say hello and hand them my capability statement and potentially ask about a later appointment. It's worth a $5 gift certificate from Starbucks. No, I mean, and I can tell you that seems to work. Receptionists love you, and plus, those receptionists are critical to your business development because you can always go to them, find out what's going on, find out when your customer is available, particularly when you're on the front end. And then, so what you do from there is once you say hello, you're already showing to him or her a proactive approach, and then you get that first meeting, and then you find out about the customer's ideal state, just like we're talking about through the attributes that we talked about. And once you understand that the customer's ideal state, you do the due diligence on the capability gaps with the incumbent, and then you go back in and you say, hey, I'd like to make an unsolicited proposal to you, And what you're basically doing is shaping that customer's thinking. He may not be ready to put out a new solicitation, and he may have to put it out to bid. But again, you've laid your marker down, you've shown him something, you're influencing the action, and you're showing him value that your customer value. And so the unsolicited domain is something that is not tapped into by entrepreneurs enough in the government domain. And I can tell you, right now with the new COVID-19 reality, I mean, all the agencies are shut down, so that ability to make sales calls and talk to customers. And then, and as everybody knows on the call, the ability to get in the door, particularly with a contracting officer, can be very, very difficult. But anyway, that's one technique that I think will work. It's proven to me. I would just hand that along as some advice for others. Are we good on that, Casey?
Yes, sir. He replied and said that was a great answer. I actually have an individual who is looking to break into a different type of sector within contracts with the government, and I'm going to put him on video if he wants to. You don't have your video on, Michael, but if you're okay with it, just go ahead and speak and ask your question.
Hello, can you see me now?
I can.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, sir, and the platform for the question here. My question is I'm, as Casey was saying, kind of what I do is a little different than selling. My job as a life coach is I sell the services I offer through the communication that I have with the business or the clients. But my entrepreneur mind has been spinning since we've been diving deep into this government contracting here. And my question is you, as selling flooring materials, you are looking for people asking for the services you offer. But what about somebody going through the list of who they know, and instead of looking for something in particular, getting something that they're seeing as coming in as a request, and then going out and looking for the supplier through the contacts that they may have? So for instance, my grandfather sells diesel mechanic equipment and things like that. I have another family member that sells other things. So I have access to two different avenues of things to sell. What is your advice on not really knowing much solely on either of these businesses, but knowing that I have a trustworthy business to access to possibly sell things for them, to go out and looking for government solicitations that are selling though or asking for the products that I possibly could put together for that? What's your take on that?
Great question, Michael, and thank you for it. And it really goes to the other aspect, whereas today we're talking for the most part about customer relationships. Again, in my opening remarks, I talked about the fact that supplier relationships are equally important. And let me just give you my background on that. And I want to use an example that you brought up. And so you have family, which I love the family dimension. As an entrepreneur, always rely on your closest contacts because they're the most reliable. And so, for instance, if you've got a certain family member that has a product line that is relevant in the federal government domain, then talk to that relative or talk to that supplier. You got to think of him as in terms of a supplier too. Think about, again, you think about your potential customer base in their ideal state, and you look at the material solution specifically, and you need to deep dive the material solution attributes. So you look at, you can go out and readily, I'm sure your relative already knows how his material solution stacks up against the competition. He knows what the winning attributes of that product line are, and he can help you compile that and become make a distinctive marketing tool for you to go to a potential federal government customer. And so where you come into the mix is you're the business developer. You understand and establish that material, that supplier relationship. For instance, in my business in floor covering, even though I represent Mannington exclusively on my GSA contract, I have relationships with all the major flooring manufacturers, Shaw, Interface, Accept, Arquette, et cetera. And I have established relationships. I just choose to use Mannington for my purposes because they are a very healthcare specific, unique product offering that has multiple platforms that can cover any space in the VA. So that same kind of thought process about seeing what your customer needs are and how they can be applicable, and then look at your supplier and see what their attributes are and their ability to play. And you may, want to have an exclusive relationship with a particular supplier, or you may want to have multiple relationships. And there's a real art and science to that we can get into, because you want to be, and then the other thing too is the small business aspect of this. And this is something that a lot of people misunderstand. By statute, by federal statute, 23% of every taxpayer dollar that goes into a government contract has to be spent with a small business. So we have 23% of the marketplace that's uniquely to us. We don't have to fight against I don't have to compete with my manufacturer suppliers, right? I'm giving them extended market reach that they can't have. by statute, by law, they can't get to the place in the market that I can get there. That's why they need to do business with me, because I guarantee you all these floor covering manufacturers are not going to concede 23% of the market to somebody else, right? So they have to have small business relationships. And so that's why your supplier relationship is so critical to you. You actually give them market reach that they wouldn't have otherwise. You give them a capability to sell that they wouldn't otherwise have. You become a business developer for that supplier that he may not have in-house. And so you're that active agent out there working to get that customer relationship to expand his sales and his market share. So that strategic supplier relationship works like that. I hope I'm answering your question.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much.
Casey, back to you. How we doing?
Yeah, no, well, this is fantastic. We have one of our advisors who was a salesman by trade before joining our team has a question. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute him. This is BJ.
Love it. Hey, BJ.
Okay, Ben. So you touched on cold calls. First of all, I love those too, because the worst they can say is no. And they don't know you. But you perked my ears up when you said something, because the tools that we have at our disposal as a salesperson, or even the owner of a business to sell the company, would be to butter up the the people up front, so they'll let you wander back there. But what I found when I was trying to sell to governments, when I was in the forklift battery business, was even getting on base was a little harder back then, but getting into the shops that you need to get into, how do you work that for some of these guys that maybe don't have access to post or anything like that? Because I think that's probably going to be their number one struggle as starting out, is how do I put my footprint out there without bothering the security force that that is the U.S. government?
Well, I tell you, BJ, you just hit on one of the biggest showstoppers and why people don't do federal government business. And it's access. It's access, and depending on what agency that you're working with, the access can be very, very difficult and complex, or it can be looser. DOD nowadays is becoming increasingly more difficult and complex. And if you're working with, sales professionals from a specific manufacturer, and you're trying to help them gain access to a military installation, like I'm sitting on the back gate of Camp Pendleton right now. Most of the salespeople I know from all the flooring manufacturers in this area would rather get poked in the eye with a sharp stick than try to get access to Camp Pendleton. So I see your point exactly. So what you have to do is you have to right seat that. In many cases, you have to right seat that. And you have to take them in, and you have to use your knowledge to get them down to, at some point, even in the military domain in particular, and I'm going to use that as an example, there's going to, whatever product you're offering, right? There's going to be a specifier. Somebody writes the spec for that product and writes the requirement for that military installation, right? That's the person you've got to get them to, because that is your key procurement decision maker. A sales professional in the private sector has no ability to connect the dots like that. You do. And so you've got to right seat that. And then once you get in there and you start influencing the action, you build that annuity-based relationship, you get a couple of contracts under your belt, then you become the incumbent. And then what you can do once you get a contract in place is you can get that sales professional credential to go into the base by themselves. But it's laborious, BJ, as you know. It's painful, but it's also opportunity for guys like us, right?
Amen. And one thing I'll say about that, guys, is high risk, high reward. I know it takes a special individual, and I really do appreciate you answering that question for me. Seriously, that was a great answer.
Thanks, BJ. I appreciate the question.
And Sir Ben, I've got a service member he's an inventor. He actually lives in the same town I live here in Colorado. I'm gonna allow him he wants to share a story and maybe some comments and questions. David, floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Saylor. Can you all hear me?
David, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So this is kind of snowballing off what your response to BJ was in getting your foot in the door. So I developed a device that attaches onto vehicles and secures medical equipment and weapon systems. And there's a pull handle on the side that ejects whatever's hanging from it. So I'm in Parker, Colorado, and just up the road is Fort Carson. And I know 10th Group has a specific branch within 10th Group called the Force Mod Command. And they're in charge of looking at new products specifically for their mobility package. And I tried for like 3 weeks to get in touch with someone, just cold calling and trying to get there so I could demo what I've created for these guys. And every time, so one particular point to you, BJ, is like every military installation has, a website with a directory. And that's where I started, is just the post directory. And I found 10th Group. And so I called 10th Group staff duty and I was like, I need to talk to someone in the Force Mod Command. Once a week I called and every response I got from CQ was, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never even heard of Force Mod Command. I mean, I don't even know what that is. So it's kind of like one of those arms within 10th Group that if you don't know about it, you're not told about it, you don't know. So I began to do more research and found out it's also known as the S8 shop. So the third week I called, I said, can I get into the S8? Someone at S8. And sure enough, they transferred me to the guy. I spoke directly to the guy who's in charge of looking at all the stuff for mobility. And I got a meeting, which in turn turned into, hey, can you implement this technology on a new M240, M249 vehicle weapons cradle? And so that's what I've been developing for them for the past 3 months. And I just showcased the first prototype to them last week and they loved it and think it's going to be a force multiplier. Working on the second version now. But regardless, I just wanted to say, BJ, like all these military installations, just start on that phone roster and you'll probably get bounced around 100 times, but you'll finally get to the person you need to talk to and you'll have your pitch dialed in and you'll know what to, because you've talked to so many people already. And it does get annoying, but I think that's what makes the military community special as entrepreneurial driving force in this economy, is our persistence and determination to say, well, screw you, you couldn't get me to the right person, I'm done. Instead, we revert to our military training and say, well, screw you, you couldn't help me, so I'm going to go continue to, knock down walls and figure out how to overcome some of these hurdles and getting to the right person. So I think, that's all I have to share. So thank you.
Hey, David, congratulations on that. And you and BJ and Michael are really motivating me here. That's a success story, and that's an entrepreneur's story right there. That's true entrepreneurship. Never taking no for an answer, navigating that path, figuring out who you need to talk to. And the couple of things I would add to that, David, is, and I think you would agree with this, I hope you would, is that, when you have a new, innovative, cutting edge capability, particularly in the military domain, where you want to go is exactly where you went at Carson. You want to get into the R&D domain. You don't want to be showing that capability to program or records or that kind of stuff. You want to get where, the government purchases off the shelf new and emerging capabilities. So I applaud your tenacity in that. And you're right. Every time you get in front of a potential government customer and they say no to you, you sharpen your pitch, right? But one of the things too is that when you're doing the deep dive through the phone directory, which we all have done, don't ever forget about the small business specialist. There's small business specialists in all military installations. Always pulse them and ask for their advice. They they actually get paid to help you with those types of innovative approaches to material solutions. So congratulations.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And David has been a shining example of a relentless pursuit of something or somebody, and being willing to adapt and change target if needed. So
I want to make one more, Casey, if you don't mind. I know
Yeah.
we're probably getting close to the time here, but again, just a point about entrepreneurship, and that vignette that David just shared is terrific. There's no better example of entrepreneurship than that. But what I like about that too is that entrepreneurs have to always evolve at the speed of relevance in their customer base. Okay, so now, David, you have some success with your customer, right? You've got the capability out there, you've got some success under your belt, but guess what? You can't embrace the status quo. The day you embrace the status quo on that capability and don't evolve it with your customer's requirements, guess what? Somebody's going to step up and take your place, right? So again, it's all about that voice of the customer, and staying as tight on the voice of customer and evolving it at their speed. And that's what makes you a strong incumbent.
well said. Well, and in terms of that, I actually have another question, and I don't know how much more time you have, sir, but
I'm here. I'm good.
fantastic. So we actually have one of our veterans runs a company that's medical distribution. They were in the surgical sales space, and COVID hits and they moved their target. They adapted and found a new way, and they're involved in PPE. Now, this question comes from him. It says, we just won a teaming agreement with a multi-billion-dollar manufacturer. Do you have any experience with teaming agreements, and how do you best leverage them?
I do. Teaming agreements are a very significant facilitator, or even they can even set you apart. And again, this goes into supplier relationships. Again, a different topic, but very, very relevant. For instance, in the flooring industry, I'm a General Services Administration contract holder, have been for 20 years. And I use teaming agreements all the time with other small businesses. So for instance, I represent, as I indicated, Mannington Flooring Products on my GSA contract. I have teaming agreements with other manufacturers and also other small businesses. So if they have other manufacturing products like Interface, Tarkett, whatever the case may be, through that teaming arrangement, I can sell off of their GSA contract into that customer base. So I'm never without a material solution, is what I'm saying. And in the PPE world, man, you talk about entrepreneurship and the ability to gain success. Let me talk a little bit about COVID-19 realities, and particularly in my domain. For instance, federal government contracting operates on a fiscal year basis, right? Fiscal year starts on 1 October, and then you have 4 fiscal year quarters that close out the end of September, right? So we're in the middle of July right now. So we just entered the 4th quarter, July, August, September, right? This is the selling season for federal government, because with congressional appropriations for government contracts, they have all fiscal year to expend that appropriated dollar. But, historically, they do the vast preponderance of it, 70% or more, in the last fiscal quarter, July, August, September. So this is sprint time in terms of agencies spending their appropriated dollars. Okay, what's different about COVID-19 and the additional, COVID-19 appropriation that Congress has put out there? Well, over and above normal agency appropriations, Congress has appropriated $325, give or take, billion to buy COVID-specific material solutions like PPE. So for instance, I mentioned that contracting officer that called me the other day for flooring solutions. And so he called me and he said, hey, give me 110 cartons of UmptyFrats. And I said, well, Larry, that's your credit card authority goes up to 10K. And I said, do you want me to tailor that to get under that 10K window? He said, oh, no, because of the COVID-19 additional appropriation, my purchase card authority is now extended to 20K. So, hey, I'll take 20K orders all day, every day. So again, that goes back to understanding the the procurement process and that being able to navigate that successfully. But I can tell you, those teaming arrangements with prospective suppliers, there's an art to that. Finding that right teaming partner requires the same amount of due diligence as looking for the right customer and looking at the right opportunities. Do the due diligence. Make sure you align yourself with that particular supplier. Make sure you have a good solidified agreement in place so you have good terms and conditions. Okay, it's the reality of it is that agreement that you sign with that particular supplier, there should be very favorable terms in there. You want to get paid for what you bring to the table. For instance, and I don't want to get into terms and conditions. Have very favorable terms and conditions so you get for your business development what you bring to the table for that particular supplier. You get adequately and more than adequately compensated for the time and effort you're putting into that. Right. So, teaming with the right supplier is perfect. Strategically aligned with what they bring to the marketplace, you amplifying that through your small business ownership and market reach into the federal government segment, and then making sure you get compensated appropriately through that supplier relationship and agreement. So, you're not out there, digging and not getting compensated for your efforts. Bottom line is, it's all about getting paid at the end of the day. Okay. That sounds a little mercenary, but it's the truth.
Well, if you're not making a profit, you can't grow your business, and you can't sustain, and you can't give back and do all the things that we all want to do. So
I hope that answered the question or addressed it.
yeah, and I'm sure that there are a ton of specifics there. So I don't know if anybody has any other questions, but until I see another one, I had a question I always like to ask people. So we're in this bizarre world, and maybe this is the new world order that we're in. Usually I would ask, what would you tell, if you had known 10 years ago before you got into the wild success that you've had, what would you have told yourself looking back? If you could talk to that person 10 years ago, what would you tell yourself? And so really the question is now, what your experience in government contracting, this new world that we're in, and the advice of what advice can you give? I mean, you've given some phenomenal stuff. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen, pay attention, connect, engage, all this sales stuff. On top of that, what kind of advice would you give to our vets as they engage the government contract world?
That's a fantastic question, Casey. I appreciate you asking that. I would tell you this, and all of the people on the Zoom session today, you've had different experience in your military. And I'm going to say this. I want to say it and finesse it the right way. But it's, there's a lot of people out there that write books, try to capitalize on military experience, and that's fine. It's all well and good, etc. But what I would tell you, the advice I would tell Ben Saylor 16 years ago is this: as an entrepreneur, you need to live life through the windshield, not through your rearview mirror. There's a reason why the rearview mirror is small and the windshield's large. And so you need to be able to see opportunities, look into the business domain that you're entering, and see opportunities where other people see hurdles and showstoppers. So that's the art of entrepreneurship. And I'll tell you that the greatest skill that you bring to the table is your ability to build relationships. Put everything else aside, and you'll go through, particularly if you're in a sales environment, you'll go through some extensive rewiring as you enter the private sector and find out what it takes to be a small business owner and an entrepreneur. But it all boils down to this: if you think about your military experience and the success you achieved, it was all about relationships and team. Well, in the private sector, business, just like warfighting, is a preeminently human endeavor. And so your ability to build relationships in that human endeavor in the private sector is almost identical to your ability to build relationships that you learned in the military that made you successful as part of a team that could go out and take care of our nation's business. Now you're doing you're doing it for a very different outcome. But that relationship building skill set is what you need to amplify and work on as an entrepreneur. That's what's going to get you in the end zone.
Fantastic answer. Gosh, that's great. I mean, we talk about individually, us as advisors try to talk to our vets weekly, and sometimes it's just over text, but just an encouraging word like that coming from someone like you that can see, you know what's behind you, you can see the forward, you have the history, and you can apply it. I was curious about one thing, and maybe we can wrap up with this, or if you have closing statements after answering this question, that would be great. Why did you get into flooring? Why was it flooring your background, or did it just sort of happen? And part of the reason why I ask is we do have some vets on here that, like Michael in his question of connecting the diesel parts sales rep with the government agency, we have a lot of that where I'll find the chairs, I'll find the flooring, I'll find the fill in the blank to connect the dots. So I guess, how did you navigate that decision?
Thanks for asking that question, because I think it's also relevant to who we are as entrepreneurs. Again, when I got out, I worked, in the combat developments domain for a number of years, and it was great. But, I said, hey, I want to do something different. I want to get into manufacturing, and I want to get into a sales culture. And so I started looking for opportunities. And, entrepreneurship, so much of success is dictated by timing, right? Well, guess what happened? I was out there and I was in the search. I was networking with potential contacts, and this opportunity in flooring came along. And so I jumped on it, and so it was more than anything else, Casey. It was timing. It was just the right opportunity at the right time, and I tell you what, it's been terrific. Flooring is about as far away from the Marine Corps as you can get, But it's been great because, again, everything that we're talking about. Again, the product is really a widget. Everything that we're talking about in terms of business development, small business ownership, winning government contracts is in the service domain, not the material domain. And so the flooring industry is a great domain. It has a lot of relevance in everything that's going on in our nation. But it did give me the opportunity to really get in and understand manufacturing and the manufacturing sector, and it also got me into the sales domain, and so it's been a great experience for me. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. We have a lot of people in here that pursue different trades for different reasons, and
I tell you what, when an opportunity comes your way as an entrepreneur, shake it for all it's worth, and figure out, hey, is that something I want to do? Because timing a lot of times will give you the path forward.
Amen. I like it. Well, I hope that you all have enjoyed this and learned something. I have. I'm excited to rewatch this and replay some of the stuff that I couldn't pick up on. But just even, we have some folks on here that aren't even in government contracting that definitely picked up some stuff. So I wanted to thank all you vets for being here. Thank you guys for the time, the questions, the engagement. And Ben, thank you. A special thank you to you. You took valuable time to engage us for the last hour plus. So thank you. I'll leave it to you for closing remarks.
Well, Casey, thank you so much for the opportunity. John, I love this program. I think it's an incredible program. It's great to be affiliated with the Simplify America's Fund, and to be able to share thoughts and advice to great vets like you have in this program. So it's been my privilege to be here today. And then in the handout, we didn't get all the way through it, which is fine. I didn't want to. I just wanted to have a good conversation. But on the last page of that handout, you'll see a number of hyperlinks. And so as you look down through small business registration and the capabilities statement, just click on that link in the Adobe, and it'll take you right to the place where you'll have everything you need at your fingertips to be able to take that on. And so again, with that, Casey, I tell you, John, Casey, thank you so much. Best luck to you. Hopefully you have my contact information, and if you ever need anything, I'll always be there for you.
Yeah, what a blessing. Thank you so much. Thank you again. And if we have any specific questions, I'll reach out afterwards, and maybe I can feel there's probably some deeper conversations here that we could leverage your expertise on if you're willing. So thank you. We're very grateful. Thank you again. And guys, thanks again for your patience and for your great questions. I hope everybody has a great week.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.